Well, hello everybody, I'm Jonty Pearce. I'm the editor of Call Center Helper, and we have an exciting webinar for you today. It's the first of our 2013 series, and it's called 5 Great Ways to Improve Customer Satisfaction. So we've got a lot of very useful information for you on this webinar. So in terms of the agenda today, I'm Jonty Pearce. I'm editor of Call Center Helper. I'm delighted to be joined by 2 well-respected people, both of which are quite experienced as judges in various contact center awards. We're first going to be joined by Weald from Deloitte Consulting. I've known Paul for over 8 years and has published a number of articles in Call Center Helper over the time. Also delighted to be joined by Michael Gray from Ultra Communications, the cloud communications supplier. I've known Michael for about 20 years, and Michael also has written quite a lot of content that's appeared in Call Center Helper. They're not necessarily published under his name. So delighted with the great audience, with great panel we've got there. We're also going to throw open top tips from the audience. It's your chance to have your say, as well as interactive questions and answers. We do like to make this as interactive as we can. So another poll, we're going to be talking about customer satisfaction. So I'd like to share with a poll of how do you measure the success of customer interactions. And your choices are, do you use the customer satisfaction score, customer satisfaction, and you can vote on more than one of these. First contact resolution, net promoter score, a customer effort score, or do you measure some other form of things such as customer delight? If there's some way of customer interactions that I haven't put onto these votes, if you'd just like to type that into the question box, and we can just pull that up. So, Paul, before we get on to you, wonder if you've got any thoughts about which one or ones you think are likely to be the most popular on there.
Well, firstly to say, Jonty, we've deliberately not put some of the kind of sweatshop type measures. So those people that measure agent utilization and toilet breaks and things like that, then please keep that to yourselves. And the purpose of the webinar is very much to think about how you actually understand what's working for sort of customers, hence the range of options that are presented here sort of today.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the results then. And the answers are 60% of people, most popular is the customer satisfaction score, or a customer satisfaction score. There's a number of different ways of doing that. First contact resolution, much higher than net promoter here. That's probably a little bit of surprise because I hear so much talk about net promoter. 9% of people using the customer effort score, which is quite interesting, and 13% of people using customer delight. So yeah, sort of quite a range of topics on there. So some great things. If you haven't got anything in there, if you'd like to, your scheme isn't listed. Claire has written in to say we use a system called Viewer, though she doesn't describe what Viewer does. So if you could put some things into there. And Danielle says we currently don't have anything in place measurement but we do use direct customer feedback and call analysis in trying to work out what will work best for us at the moment. So a range of different things there. So I think within the audience, I'll just pull back to the slides. Now delighted to introduce you to Paul Weald from Deloitte Consulting, and Paul is going to take us through the first group of our 5 strategies to improve customer satisfaction. So if you'd like to just pop the slides up on your screen, Paul.
Bring up the slides.
Just get them up. Annalise has said, we use customer surveys, but I'd like to get more accurate results than the surveys are showing.
Okay, so the wonders of virtual technology. If this was a live conference, you'd all be able to see me. So I thought I'd actually put a sort of picture up. For those of you that don't know me, you can see what I actually look like. So yeah, the kind of context of today's session builds upon a piece that I wrote for Jonty back in October of last year, which is where I shared with a you as his audience, the findings from a 2012 judging activity that I'd done, and that I understand was very well received. A large number
Certainly been a very popular article on the site.
Excellent, excellent.
We'll also add a link to it at the into the webinar page as well. So if anyone wants to, after the webinar, go and have a look at that, they can get there.
Yep, that's absolutely perfect, Jonty. So that then really gave me the clue for what I wanted to talk about today, which is pretty much to look back in time over the last 5 or 6 years that I've had the privilege of actually being a judge, and actually understand what has changed over that time, and also secondly what we can learn. So what I'm going to talk you through is essentially the first 3 strategies that potentially you can use in terms of improving customer satisfaction, and these are all things that I've learned from the award winners over the years. The sort of context of what's changed in the last 5 or 6 years is also worth understanding, which is that we very much now live in a multi-channel world. So in other words, the days of just purely providing a telephone-only service have very much been replaced by the fact that we need to support our customers however they wish to actually communicate with us. So there are some behaviours and habits that are changing. I think as consumers we're all getting used to self-serve, not necessarily by punching in numbers into an IVR, but actually in terms of our own consumer behaviours, we are getting more used to actually buying goods online, whether that's our groceries, whether that's holidays, and so forth. And I found myself in the supermarket now opting to go to the self-service checkout because that's often got a sort of shorter queue. So I think our behaviours are that we're used to actually taking control as consumers. We're also becoming quite sophisticated. The days of now being able to use our smartphones to be able to access information on the move, and actually expecting that customers are going to be able to deal with us regardless of how we actually get in sort of contact. So those are the things that are actually changing most in terms of the past 5 years. But if I look back to the first year that I was a judge, which was 2007, and the winner of the Best Customer Service category in the European Continental Awards that year was actually Lego. So Lego is a brand that everyone is knowledgeable with. But what was interesting about that particular visit was actually to see the way in which Lego had created a multilingual call center and had really deeply defined a culture that they wanted the brand to actually represent and how they were dealing with sort of customers. So the Lego Center is based in Slough, which wasn't exactly the first place I would have thought I would have found a multilingual call center, but essentially supporting about a dozen languages. What they were doing was actually getting staff living in central London to commute 20 minutes on the train out to Slough, and they were then providing a service. And a couple of things came out for me. The first was that they actually wanted a way to make the culture memorable. And they created a phrase, and I've seen a mnemonic type approach used by other centres as well since then. But what Lego did was they defined their culture as freaky, and it's something that's stayed with me ever since. Without even looking at the slide, I can tell you that freaky means that Lego is fun. I can tell you that their brand is reliable. I can tell you that they are knowledgeable, and that it is engaging.
And indeed, Paul didn't look at the slide when he was doing that.
So it's one of those mnemonics that works because it actually becomes just as a third party. It's become ingrained in me that I understand what that sort of brand sort of means. So that's the kind of the first tip is actually about defining your culture so that it actually becomes memorable for both your agents and potentially your staff. Then we move forward a couple of years. I'm sure many of the people in the audience today have had the opportunity to visit the British Gas Centre in Cardiff. It's their premier customer centre. And back in 2009, I judged them when they were in the Best Improvement category, which they were successful in, and they went on for further success in subsequent years. And I know that Jonty's visited the centre, and there's a number of articles that relate to their story. But the thing that I want to highlight here today is actually it was the first time that I'd seen a call centre invest in training their agents to actually recognize and understand different personalities. So essentially it was about understanding what type of personality you as an individual have, and then once you become that self-aware, you can then relate to your team members and most importantly relate to customers. So they had a training initiative called Look Who's Calling, and that was about actually understanding and visualizing what that customer was like by listening in the first 30 seconds of the call. So they essentially defined customers using a simple version of the Myers-Briggs personality approach. So they broke people down into 4 different types. There's a controller, so someone who very much likes to be very brisk, be very functional in terms of interactions. An entertainer, so someone who's very extrovert. A thinker, so someone who needs information before they can make decisions. And more of an emotional feeler type person. And essentially that was very successful in terms of being able to ensure that the customer conversation was mirrored in a style that was going to work for the person on the end of the phone. So that's and I've seen that type of approach done subsequently, but 2009 with British Gas was the first year for me that I'd seen it sort of done in that way.
And we're certainly going to be publishing in the next 4 weeks an article on those 4 personality styles and how people can use them in their own contact centres.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
Stay tuned.
And again, it's not just about understanding customers. The other thing that was very interesting that I remember from the original visit was that the natural style that we have individually is something that was made known within the centre. So as you walk around the centre, there's a photograph of someone's someone's face and their name, and underneath it actually had their sort of personality type. And what that therefore meant was that, particularly for team leaders, they could then modify how they were going to provide information. So in other words, if someone was a thinker, you wouldn't just bowl up to them and immediately say, can you actually tell me about this? You might perhaps send an email through, give them a chance to think about it, and then when you did have that conversation, that person was actually going to be able to give you the best sort of information. So that was 2009. We now fast forward to last year in 2012, and Labara were successful both in the European Contact Centre Awards, and they were in for the Customer Experience Awards that I was actually judging in. And there they were really into creating an emotional connection with sort of customers. So the thing about Labara as their brand, they provide sort of prepaid calling cards, prepaid phone cards, and essentially their target market are for foreign nationals, so people living overseas who want to communicate sort of back home. And what essentially they did was, although a lot of the service can be provided online, self-service, is that when people did have an issue and they wanted to communicate with sort of Labara, they tried to make that interaction as positive as sort of possible. So they created their mnemonic was actually smile, and that was actually a metaphor for wanting to make the actual customer smile. So they were very much at the sort of customer delight end of the spectrum in terms of the approach that they were actually taking. And what's also interesting is that when I look, and back to the poll question that you answered a few minutes ago, when I looked at the measures that were being used, they've actually also changed over sort of time. So back in 2007, Lego were focused on sort of net promoter. Very briefly, for those that haven't heard of that, you essentially ask a question of the customer at the end of the call. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far would you actually recommend the organisation? And those that score 9 or 10 are totted up, and those that score 6 or less are totted up, and effectively one is taken away from the other. So it's the attractors minus the detractors that actually gives you your net promoter score. So what was interesting about how Lego were applying that was that in terms of customer service, they weren't really trying to sell anything, but they were trying to actually create some sort of cross-sell. And what they realized in terms of commercial outputs was that if they could get someone to join the Lego club, then they knew that over time the spend was actually going to be higher. And so therefore, the only type of cross-sell at the end of a call was to look at the customer's profile. If they weren't a member of the Lego club, was then to suggest that they actually might like to join and to tell them the sort of benefits. And so over time, Lego certainly saw improvements in sort of net sort of promoter. With British Gas, they started using Net Promoter, but actually moved now more towards customer effort. So customer effort is taking a slightly different perspective because it's essentially trying to make sure that the interactions are kept as simple as possible. So in other words, people don't particularly relish and enjoy having to pay for their energy, mainly because the prices have been going up so much over the previous years. So essentially what British Gas thought was more relevant to their customer base was to make it as simple as possible to actually sort of engage. So they've actually moved towards customer effort. And again, there are video clips available on the Helpful website. John Connolly, who is head of innovation at British Gas, talks very eloquently about how they've actually used measures. And again, perhaps, Jonty, that's something else that can be shared.
Yeah, we can certainly add those links. And there's also quite a nice YouTube clip of Labara, which we'll also share that link as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, the reason that's a very good prompt, because the reason that the Labara story is so relevant by looking at the video is it comes to life. You can see the emotional connection. You can see agents, how they interact with sort of customers. But also, what was interesting for me last October when I judged Labara was they had a way of measuring customer satisfaction that I hadn't seen before. And what they did was essentially say, we can track customers that have engaged with our sort of call center, and we can actually compare the behavior of those customers with those that don't get involved with the contact center. Because as I said before, essentially you can use the prepay service very much in a sort of self-service way. And what essentially they've been able to understand is what is the relative level of spend and the churn rate for those customers that do engage with the call center versus those that sort of don't. What they've been able to define is actually what that difference is. So in other words, how much extra customers spend. And that is a way of being able to really genuinely understand that the contact center is sort of adding value to the overall sort of organization. So going back to your poll scores, 38% of you are using Net Promoter, and only 9% are using sort of customer effort. And I would imagine no one is as sophisticated as using a commercial as a customer value. And by all means, if I'm wrong in that assumption, by all means, type a sort of message in and to let us know. So in terms of the first three recommendations, the first three customer service strategies that I've seen that I know actually will make a positive difference. The first is all about the culture that you have within your organization. It's an ability to actually create a customer vision and bring that to life in a way that you can communicate to staff. So by all means, make it fun. So create mnemonics, create simple ways that staff can understand it. So that's the first top tip. Secondly, from what I've seen most recently, it's about how you create an emotional connection. So that's about, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and actually then understanding how to get your message across to that particular customer. And thirdly, you're going to need to know that the actions that you're taking are working for your customers. So it's actually about having a framework, having some measurements to be able to understand the customer experience, to rate the customer experience that you're providing. That also very usefully gives you a way to actually chart sort of success. And if you look back at any of those companies that I've mentioned, they can demonstrate how the NPS score has, or how that particular measure has sort of gone up over sort of time.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Paul. And certainly a number of contact centers I've seen are sort of almost starting to throw away things like AHT, or average handling time, as one of the key metrics on there. So what we're going to do, just a reminder that you can add in your top tips to improve customer satisfaction at any time during the webinar, and have a chance to win a bottle of champagne. So I'm just going to pull up another poll now, and that poll is what gets in the way of you delivering a good customer experience. Is it, so I'll just launch that up now. Is it that you're too busy? For instance, you're flooded with calls. Measurement gets in the way of delivering a good customer experience. Getting agents engaged and on side. Is it broken processes that cause problems, or is it actually problems in the rest of the company that aren't any direct responsibility, if you like, of the or direct control of the contact center that you pick up from? So if you'd just like to vote on those, there's multiple choices you can vote for in there. Claire has come back and said the program that they're using was a call listening program where we can listen into the calls the agents use, and also another system where we can have customers leave comments on rating the call and then can leave a voicemail comment. So that's the system that Claire uses there. So answers coming in here. Michael, there's just not wanting to put you on the spot. Any ideas of what you think might come up popular here? I'm guessing some like broken processes is one of my
I was thinking when I saw that, I thought broken processes because obviously how the customer interaction works is so dependent on those processes being right from end to end, and that's obviously something I'm going to be that's actually something I'm going to be touching on in my little talk a bit later. But yeah, I think that agent engagement as well is the other really important element that shouldn't be forgotten in delivering a great experience.
Well, let's put the results up on the screen. Perhaps not surprisingly, broken processes comes up as the largest. Too busy comes up a second little way behind that, and too flooded with calls to deal with things. 39% cite problems in the rest of the company. I know it's a big challenge that we can do great things in our contact centers, but if the rest of the company is letting us down, you can only get so far. Agent engagement, not as high as I would have expected on there probably, and measurement gets in the way. So some fabulous stuff there. What I'd like now you to do in the audience is if we could put into the question box on the right-hand side, what is the biggest problem that you face in your contact center with improving customer experience? What is the biggest single problem you face? So if you'd just like to type that into the box on the right-hand side, what is the biggest problem you face with improving customer experience? So we're starting to get some of the results coming through here. Julia said the biggest problem she finds is with mindset. I'm not sure if that's mindset of the organization, of the agents in the contact center. Kevin has said if we ever say no, it's a Disney no. We turn a negative into a positive through freebies such as goodwill credit or free loyalty points. Quite an interesting.
Who does he actually work for?
Quite an interesting one. Peter has said one of the biggest problems he faces is budget constraints. That's certainly not an easy one to do. Kevin has said tools and reporting. Georgina has said engagement. Nora has said it's being too focused on processes and not on solving problems. Monica said too many systems and dealing with other departments to solve the issue. Frederick has said dependencies to do with other departments' business rules. So for instance, credit management and business time. That's so it's not just, if you like, broken processes, but inflexible processes and rules, I guess, in the rest of the company. I guess that's quite a difficult one to deal with, Paul, is dealing with sort of inflexible processes. And I guess it's a brave person that challenges that in the rest of an organization.
Yes, I mean often it's a question of those processes predate the contact center, predate the people in the contact center, so they are taken as being unchangeable. And I guess it's if it's not working for customers, then you need to go and voice the fact with the relevant stakeholders that it's getting in the way of being able to deliver service, and isn't that what all of us want to actually achieve?
Indeed. Apologies to to Kelvin, who I misread. I must admit, I'm using my second pair of spectacles, Kelvin, so I said your name was Kevin there. Ross has said that changing advisors' mindset is an issue. Michelle has said ensuring promises are followed through by other departments. Certainly looks like other departments are quite an issue there, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I just actually wanted to go back on the point that Paul was just discussing. And I think on the broken processes front, I think what's terribly important is that people are empowered to act on the information they find during the customer interactions, and are empowered to actually take that back into the organisation. I think a lot of people, in a way, know what's going wrong, but are not empowered to actually do something about it. So certainly, again, one of the tips I'm going to be coming up with is very much focused on that, having the ability to actually take what you've learned and actually make change in your organisation.
Annalisa has said the biggest problem with improving customer experience for my team is consistency, processes and positivity in the team. They deal with budget and help desk software is also an issue, but thankfully is being addressed. Guy said one of the challenges he faces is customer-friendly words from the top, not actually by personal behaviours and policies. He's saying that's dealing with his previous company, not the one he's dealing with today. Donna has also said it's changing the mindset of long-term phone reps, allowing them to take the time to service as well as versus getting through all the calls that are holding. It's a really difficult one. If there's calls queuing, the temptation, I guess, Paul, is to try and rush through the call and deal with put out the fire down the road.
Yeah, and often a management reaction is then to start to actually monitor average handle time, which again is a step backwards, definitely not a step forwards.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of others. Victoria, this is quite deceptive. Other departments don't understand their part in service. So, they do their job, but they don't necessarily understand that what they do has a big impact on customer service.
Very, very true, and a number of the best contact centres I've certainly judged in the past have actually had programs where people from the front line actually go back into the back office and tell them about what they do, so they are aware of what the customers are saying and what needs to change to be able to serve them better.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to a few of those comments, and also we're getting the first of the tips coming through now. So I'm delighted to hand across now to Michael Gray from Ultra Communications, who's going to take us through a couple more great ways to improve customer satisfaction. So, Michael, if you'd just like to share
load my slides.
There we are.
Great, here we are, great. Thank you, Jonty, and very good afternoon to everyone. By way of introduction, I'd like to just say a few brief words about Ultra at the beginning. We're a cloud technology company. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means we deliver inbound and outbound services on a pay-as-you-go basis from the network and with very few upfront costs. And we don't just provide technology. We also monitor the operational performance of our client centers from the cloud, which enables us to provide real-time advice that's focused on improving service quality and performance. So, in a way, improving caller experience is very close to our heart because it's something we do every day for our clients. So, onto my presentation, and I'd like to start by raising a fundamental question, which is, why should we be concerned that we have happy customers at all? Well, there's an old expression that goes, if you don't take care of your customers, someone else will. And if you doubt the wisdom of those words, here's some numbers worth bearing in mind. Now, a massive 70% of customers have cited poor service rather than poor products as the reason they typically leave companies. And another figure I put on the screen, 91% of unhappy customers say they'll never purchase services again from that company. And I could cite many others. But given these numbers, and given the speed by which negative experiences can now be transmitted across social networks, it's certainly easy to see why keeping customers happy really is more important than ever. So, Paul gave 3 great tips on how to improve satisfaction, and here's 2 more. My first strategy is based on my own experiences of working in a large call centre a few years ago, and it is make sure you take advantage of every contact opportunity, not just when the customer comes to you, but when you can provide value by proactively contacting them. And Donna Fluss, who's mentioned here, is one of America's leading contact center consultants. And she's a big advocate of the proactive approach, which, as she says here, is all about making people's lives easier by anticipating their needs before they arise and by addressing issues before they become problems. I certainly very much concur with her view that to make it effective, it needs to take the form of a complete business strategy and not just a random series of events. Making it effective, I think, also has a lot to do with timing. Now, in this slide, I've broken down a typical customer life cycle into stages, and for each of the post-sale stages, I've indicated some proactive activities that can benefit the customer and benefit your business. Now, the emphasis here is on adding value, not on overloading the customer with unwanted information or indeed being too salesy. By way of example, and a few years ago, I worked as part of a team that undertook a successful proactive campaign for a mobile phone company in the UK. That campaign involved several strands that I've highlighted at the bottom of the slide, and these ranged from undertaking welcome calls to doing survey initiatives by phone and email to special promotions that we would regularly push out to customers. Now, the most successful of these initiatives was a calling campaign that we put out to customers at a point that our analysis, important to say that our analysis had revealed that they were most likely to consider changing contracts, and we made them an offer at that point to re-sign. It was a strategy that directly led to massive improvements, in fact a 2% improvement in retention, which for a large company was very highly significant, and that alone added millions to the bottom line. Another example I'd like to give you relates to an Ultra client. Recently, our performance monitoring team noticed that inbound calls were building, but the agents weren't answering them. And it turned out that the client had lost its internal phone system, a problem we were unfortunately powerless to do anything about. However, what we did was we thought quickly and came up with our own proactive solution, suggesting to the client that they provide us with a list of agent mobiles. We're then able to very quickly divert the inbound calls to these numbers, taking the pressure off the technical team and enabling our client to carry on without any impact on the customer experience at all. Indeed, this was so successful that the mobile phone backup plan that was used has now been incorporated into the company's formal disaster recovery planning. So in this occasion, it really was a case of quick thinking saving the day. So my tip to you overall is to consider what actions you can take at various stages of the customer life cycle to improve things for your customers. And if you're looking for ideas, how about checking out some of the industry's top performers and what they've achieved by going the extra mile in pursuit of excellence?
Yeah, and I think that's certainly true because all too often the customer is the owner of the problem, not necessarily the company.
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely agree. A great starting point for looking at, I think, this award-winning, excellent examples of service is to study the work of award winners, and I certainly reiterate what Paul said about the fantastic case studies that you see at the European Call Centre Awards. And indeed, the companies I've listed here are ones that I've actually personally had the privilege to visit and learn from during my judging at the European Call Centre Awards. I'd also recommend checking out the WOW Awards, and there's a great reference guide that accompanies the WOW Awards, which is entitled "Wow, That's What I Call Service," and that has over 270 pages of examples and tips literally on how to wow customers.
And what we'll do is also, if you can provide details, we'll add that.
Absolutely. I'll provide
the webinar page as well.
Some links. Certainly a link to the WOW Awards website, which has got some great stories in it. Right, my next strategy, and this is one that focuses on something that would appear to be an issue, in my experience, for a lot of companies. And that is how to make the best use of all customer feedback and interaction data we collect in our centres. Certainly in my time in the industry, I've worked with companies that spend literally ages collecting data via surveys, feedback forms, producing more data using ACDs and dialers, and then storing that information in contact recording systems, CRM systems, and lots of other systems. So in short, we know a lot about our customers, but the question is, how do we make the best use of that knowledge and analysis to serve them better in the future? Now, the key point to me is to use, the key point for me really is that while the data can provide insight, is not an end in itself. Producing it is not an end in itself. What you also need is the skills, the resources, and the processes to turn that data into actions that are going to make things better for your customers. I'd rather liken it to having an oil gauge on your car, because when the warning light comes on, the technology is telling you that you've got a problem, but fundamentally it's not going to add the oil to your car. So rather like I said about when I was talking about proactive customer service being more about a strategy than a series of actions, the same logic I think should apply to how you collect and action data. And the key really I think is to think about it less about collecting data and producing reports that sit on shelves and more about end-to-end processes. And take a simple example. I've highlighted here the example of a satisfaction survey. What I'm saying is don't just survey your customers for the sake of it. Identify your survey objectives in the context of broader business objectives and then consider each step carefully. So, for example, the questions you ask are going to be relevant and the customer isn't overloaded with too many of them. That you have an efficient and cost-effective way of reaching them, such as an automated phone survey. That you have a consistent scoring method, like Net Promoter, for example, that Paul discussed earlier. Next, that you have an agreed method of analysing results and identifying action areas based on customer feedback. So again, the end result is not to produce a report which sits and gathers dust. And finally, that you have an agreed method of prioritising what issues need to be actioned and indeed what actions are then taken. Now, this is all very much common sense, but in my experience, surprising how many centres still look at activities such as these as tactical rather than strategic and often fail to act on customer feedback and forget to track success against their broader company objectives.
Certainly you've got a friend who, whenever a survey comes up, he says, puts in the verbatim feedback saying, I'd like to speak with you, please could you contact me? And very seldom does he say, I don't think he's ever had a callback on that feedback. So there is a danger.
Absolutely,
easy to collect, but also very easy to ignore.
Absolutely. I think QED on that one very much so. For simple processes, I was going to go on to say that also in terms of sophisticated performance optimization processes, you can apply the same logic for dealing with customer data. And the way that this particular product, which is called the Real-Time Decision-Making Client from Nice Systems, works, I think illustrates the point perfectly. As you can see on screen, the engine draws data from a range of desktop applications as well as customer feedback, quality management, and a whole range of other systems. Not only does it then deliver a comprehensive analysis of data, but when you combine data from different sources, say for example with live interaction data using speech analytics, it can produce an unbelievable level of insight together with categorization and root cause analysis and other important analysis on the data. Now the reason I chose this as an example isn't only because the system gives great insight, but also because of the way that NICE has made it easy to take that learning and to use it proactively, as illustrated there. For example, if during a conversation with a mobile phone company the system were to spot competitor names and phrases such as, for example, renewal dates, bad coverage, plus it identified the customer as one approaching their renewal date, then the system can prompt the advisor with personalized information and assist in real-time decision-making. It's also great in delicate situations, for example, such as in a collections environment, where you can use the system to prompt advisors with scripts that focus on compliance and then provide guidance to agents in real time. And finally, if the software unearths some correlations and trends in the data that haven't previously been considered, so for example such as traffic peaks and their association with particular words or phrases that have been spoken, then that information can be sent directly to a specialist with the authority to act on it, then fed back into the organization, and changes made to cut out unnecessary processes and obviously enhance future experiences. So, in summary, my second strategy is to ensure that you have complete end-to-end processes for dealing with customer data and feedback. And here's my checklist. Firstly, ensure that your organization is ready to take on board the feedback customers give and indeed understand the broader impacts of changes on things like corporate objectives, staff, and your business processes. Secondly, that you invest in the technology tools and the processes that are necessary to analyze and prioritize your data and feedback. Thirdly, that you have specialists in place to analyze, interpret, and feedback learning into your organization. Fourthly, and very importantly, that you don't forget to tell customers what you're doing. And finally, that you track results to ensure you get true business benefits from your efforts. So, those are my strategies. Thank you very much for listening. You'll find Ultra on Twitter and LinkedIn if you'd like to follow us. But I hope that the strategies you've heard today will help you deliver better service and ultimately, of course, benefit your bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. That's a very good overview of, in total, between both our presenters, of 5 great strategies, 5 great ways to improve customer satisfaction. We've had a comment from Guy who said, when we were talking about the feedback loop, you know, the survey process really has one step that needs to be included, is that you often need to respond immediately. So there's a sort of a timeliness there, and I certainly know a number of organizations that actually take those verbatim comments if they're not very positive, and actually, you know, use them to generate an outbound call to say, you know, is this really an issue for you? And, you know, can then do some of the proactive customer service you were talking about. So what I'd like to now do is put up a poll then to see of those 5 strategies that we've done, how likely would they to be to stick in your organization? Which of those would you be most likely to implement? Now, you can only pick one on here, so if you'd just like to vote of those strategies, which one would you be most likely to use in your contact center? So if you'd like to just vote on that now, I think this is going to be quite an interesting one here. I wonder if there's an old law here that whether if it tends to be the first and the last often get votes on these. Let's see what what comes up.
There is a sort of pint of beer on a wager between Michael and I as to see who has the best received tip.
So let's just see what the results of that are. 24% of you think it's defining the right culture would be the most likely to implement. But the biggest one, 31%, proactive customer service. So I think
that's a pint of bitter, please.
Yes, we'll be waiting at the sort of bar later. Yes,
is a great one. Followed by defining the right culture and collecting customer feedback is quite an important one. And just a note on that one: if you're going to collect the customer feedback, I think as Guy said, you need to act on it pretty promptly as well.
Could I just say that I think if I was going to vote on that, and from my experiences working in a contact centre, I think I'd have voted Paul's number 1, actually, defining the right culture. I think the culture within call centres is possibly, to me, the most important aspect.
Yeah, and that would be because at the end of the day, you can't give good service unless your staff are completely engaged and have the right mindset.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that would be a sort of resonance there.
Okay, now it's the turn of your audience to do a little bit of work. It's your chance to have your say. We're looking at top tips to improve customer satisfaction. If you'd like to put any tips you have into the box on the right-hand side, and there's a bottle of champagne for the best tips. So let's see what the audience have sent in. Rachel's been busily typing these up into the background. Ian has said an age-old edict: never oversell and under-deliver. Make sure expectations of service levels are established, published, and met consistently. I certainly think that's a problem. A lot of people quote the service level agreement as a we'll get back to you within 5 working days. Often can sound a little bit hollow, I guess.
I know the issue there is, does the service level resonate and make sense with the sort of customer? So if your credit card isn't working and someone says we'll get back to you in 3 days, and you're trying to pay for some goods or services in the shop when you've rung the organisation, then I'm afraid that that isn't going to sort of resonate.
Yeah.
So that's the only caveat I would add to that, is that those business rules need to be relevant to the sort of customer.
Yeah. But certainly setting the expectation lower and doing better than that is a great way to increase customer satisfaction. Right, Kelvin has said, our golden rule: never say no to a customer. I guess that's a brave one. If a customer service representative can't deliver a solution for the customer, they escalate this to their team lead, so strategically we can resolve the root cause. I think root cause, Michael, is quite an important one to get to the root cause on that. I'm not sure how easy it would be.
I'm not sure about never saying no to a customer. It really doesn't it depend on the question. I think there are occasions when it's perfectly acceptable to say no to a customer as long as it's appropriate, and as long as it's put in such a way that it's acceptable.
Yeah, I guess it's probably the computer says no. Is the thing we're trying to avoid there. Guy, also feedback, act on feedback. Hardly any companies do it. It seems like companies think that measuring the problem will solve it, but customers are won and lost one at a time. I think that's quite a...
Yeah. I would, if I could just chip in there, just saying I started life as a market researcher, and there is nothing more frustrating than actually doing work, producing a report, thinking you have the answer, and nobody actually does anything about it.
Yeah,
it's it's the report sitting on the shelf issue.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, one of the problems, Paul, with the Net Promoter Score, is it does an awful lot of customer feedback. So you ask a lot of questions, but you're only really interested in the would you recommend us question.
Yeah, I mean the point about having a measure like that is, particularly if it's used throughout the organisation, not just in the contact centre, is it is a sort of barometer. But having said that, like the barometers measure the weather, the weather changes. Yeah. And certainly I know one of the reasons that British Gas are moving away from NPS is they know that every time they announce a price increase, NPS score goes down by sort of 10 points.
Yeah.
So again, when you look back on those results, you don't necessarily remember the external factors that were also influencing it.
Whereas it's really, what can the person on the phone do is really the key thing we want to do. And Kelvin also says, and when we say no, it's the Disney no, which we talked about earlier. Very good. Annalisa said, +1s work for us: a follow-up call, or a box of chocolates, or a free trial of a paid feature.
Oh, perfect. I completely agree with Annalise.
Yeah, I think that works very well. I'd certainly like to receive a box of chocolates after an interaction that perhaps hadn't gone as, following a negative experience would help a lot. We've found that scraping the script has a huge positive impact. Treating the customer as scrapping the script has a huge positive impact. Treating the customer as the individual that they're talking to, like a fellow human being, has seen us receive feedback for us being friendly, approachable, and is bringing people back to us time and time again. So I think certainly scrapping the script. Yeah,
and Danielle's well on the way to creating, or her centre's well on the way to creating emotional connections with customers.
Yeah,
well done.
And certainly where scripts have to be used, for instance, where you have to say, calls, for instance, the calls are recorded, or if you're giving a mortgage quote to someone. I know one contact centre that's actually training their agents on reading things like poetry. So if you've got to give a script out to someone, try and at least make it sound interesting, not necessarily exciting, but rather saying, "Oh, I have to tell you this piece of regulatory information." It's try and convey something into it to make it more interesting to the customer.
Jonty, can I just add one point in there? I think the way that advisors speak to customers is terribly important, and I think that there's probably not been enough emphasis on customer skill training, customer service training for outbound agents. It's something that we tried at the centre, worked out a while ago, and not only did we actually skill people with sales skills and product skills and everything necessary to sell, but we actually gave people listening skills as well. And I think that's terribly important, to not be sort of too robotic and give people scripts, but to actually give them the skills to listen and then again act on what they've been told.
Okay, John has said listen to those that are dissatisfied and act on their advice, particularly when it rings true. Peter said getting a team member to present a sample of the customer complaints in our weekly team meetings to allow the team to review the problems faced and also feel engaged in the process of coming up with long-term solutions.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely echo those. I mean, those are illustrative of the fact that your frontline staff actually speak with more customers than, dare I say, your senior management team do. So therefore they're in actually quite a privileged position of understanding what customers want, what is and isn't working for them. And those last two tips have been actually about being proactive with that information and sharing it within the organisation. So again, that's definitely a behaviour and approach that I'd like to echo that's the the sort of way forward, so that things don't only just are not only voiced by the customer, but they're actually acted upon.
Yeah. Let's jump down the list of tips. We've got quite a large number sent, so I'll just jump down the list. Michelle, always use positive words with genuine interest for the customer needs. Tone is so important to the customer as they're not able to see us, and I think certainly tone of voice is very key there. Anna said listen and read the customer feedback. Seems to be a common theme coming through. Then you can change your own behaviour if you see what the customers say about you. Certainly, if you're going to do a survey, quite often useful to feed that straight back to the agent, so they can get sort of fairly immediate feedback on what the customers are thinking of their performance. Of course, that can be negative as well as positive. Let's put a few up, halfway up the list. Use customer focus groups, says Frederick, to find out what the customers think makes them satisfied. So focus groups are certainly important. I think one of the big problems I found with focus groups is that customers tend not to focus in them and can tend to go on a little bit of a ramble, but certainly a very useful technique. Dave said customer satisfaction is not driven by the frontline advisors. It's a reflection of, I guess that's a reflection of other parts of the company. So it is the problem that the contact center is often seen as this sticking plaster there. Victoria, make sure that everyone in your company understands the impact they have on the success of the business. Show how their actions affect the customer experience as well as the cost to the business. So certainly thinking, as we talk so much about other bits of the company being there, I guess there's a real role in educating, helping to use some of this feedback to educate the company.
I think what always goes down well is when senior management come to the call centre and take the time to speak to the frontline staff and learn from what the frontline staff are saying. And I've seen lots of different examples of where people from the call centre have gone to work in other parts of the business, and people from back office functions have gone to work in the call centre, and it really, really does, in the long term, actually reap benefits.
Well, we're going to pick up some audience questions audience questions now. Annalisa said, what's the best practice for queuing calls? Do customers really mind if queues are called? I'm always on at my team to log on to the phone systems and get through calls. Am I doing this wrong? I guess this is to do with answering a call over possibly letting it queue, but actually giving a better answer when someone does get through. Paul?
There's a kind of supply and demand angle here, Annalise, in terms of if there are many more calls coming into your operation than forecast, and therefore you've got resources available to handle, then queuing is an inevitable consequence. So the question then is, how do you design a customer experience whilst they are queuing? I think that's then in that situation about actually giving the customer options. So you can apply technology so that essentially the customer can be called back whilst maintaining their place in queue. You can also provide options if you understand what the customer is likely to be asking you, where they can find that information. So whether that is online or through other sort of contact methods. But I think however you try to look at it, queuing will always happen at sort of some point over the life of any average week.
Yeah, absolutely concur with that, and it's something that we do for our clients as well. Not only, mainly where we give the customer the choice in queue, we will allow them to leave the queue and call them back. Tends to be when the agent is free. But I think the important thing is that you make a commitment to do that, and you actually get back to the customer in a reasonable period of time.